Sometimes do you ever want a little more from your images or photos? Maybe give them a timeless vintage film look. I know I do, and one of my favourite ways is to use Nik Collection 8. It's packed with tools that let me create those classic tones and moods. Let's take a look and explore what Nik Collection can do to bring that vintage feel into your images. And I'm using this as my base image to play. I'm in the workspace of Nik Analog, and I love the filters, the different presets that you can use. What I'm going to concentrate on is film type. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see there's filters and presets. I'm going to come down here, click on film type, and what you'll see is on the right-hand side, you'll see film types. And this is where you can get different colour tones. For example, there's warm. If I click here and choose a different look, I can get cool, subtle, black and white neutral, and black and white toned. And it depends on your image or photo and the kind of look that you're after. One of the things that I do is just come in and play and click on one of the film types and see what it does to my image. But we'll start with warm and let's have a look. I've got number 1 here. I'm going to click on 2. And what you'll find is some of the shifts are very subtle. And it's what I call adding colour depth. I'll click on number 3. I'll come down here and go into these coffee tones. And that works for an image like this that's got these beautiful leaves coming through. I might come down here and click on this one and I'll see what it does. Look at the difference in the colour shift that it's now given me. I'll click on this one and see what it does. Very subtle. And again, that's adding that little bit of different tonal range. I'm going to click on number 3, and why? Because it now makes those leaves pop and the trunks have got darker to my eye. But as the saying goes, wait, there's more. I can play with fade, strength, grain, and hardness. Let's come up to fade and see what it does. I'm going to shift that slider to the right and then to the left and see what it does and have a look at the shift of tonal depth or range. Let's come to strength and see what that does. Come here and I'll just move that slider left and right. Now, do I want grains in or noise in my image? And that is what an old film vintage look back in the day had, a lot of grain or a lot of noise in it. Let's move that slider to the left and you can see now that the grain is increasing. Now, for some people, they would look at that and go, oh, no, there's too much grain or noise. And for others, it's like, yes, this is what I'm after, that old vintage film look. So I encourage you to play with this slider and see what you can achieve. What I want to do now is play with hardness. And this is where I can shift the hardness of the grains. And I just play with the sliders and see what happens. Let's come up to another film type and let's choose a cool. And this is where you get blue and the magenta and that real vintage tone colouring. I'm going to see what it does using these film types. Click on this one here. Now have a look. I can see the undertones of that magenta or pink coming through. If I come down here and click on another film type, it changes the look again. Let's go up and see what the blue tones, and I think, oh, I like that. It adds a little bit of mystique to my image here. Now, do I want to play with fade or grains per pixel? Let's add a bit of pixel or noise into it. Now I'm thinking, oh, I like this. This is now given some depth. What I'm actually thinking now is that I'm happy with this colouring. Now, when I go back to Photoshop, I would use a cyan photo filter to bring some blue through. So I'm thinking always about constantly colour, tones, the depth of colour in my images. Let's come up and have a look at another film type, and I'm going to go black and white toned. Now they've changed. You can see that these are colours now, what look like gradients, if I can explain it that way. I'm going to click on this one, and now you start to get a little bit of a hint of infrared coming through on that image. I'll click on this one. Look at the depth in that one. Just love it. And it's got that real old vintage feel. I'll come up here, click on another one. And I'm going to come down here and do a little bit of playing with the sliders. I'm going to fade that, or I'm going to bump that up. Have a look at that. Strength. Let's see what I can get here. And then I'll play with grain per pixel. So I'm going to add some noise or grain into an image. And I leave the hardness alone. Now, do I want to play with the brightness? And I might just lift that up a little bit and see what that does. Now I think, oh, too much grain. I'll come in here and I'll just drop that down a little bit. I might even drop the brightness down. I could come in here and play with the contrast if I wanted to. Look at the different looks that I'm getting with these film types. It's like what I call a colour overlay. Once you've done all your processing, for example, you'll add the levels of curves, exposure adjustment if you're working with photos. For me, working with AI, like this image, I've got the colours there. Now what I want to do is play with the depth of colour and the tones. I'm going to come back up to the film type, and I'm going to choose the black and white neutral and see what this does. And you can see now that there's several film types there that I can choose from. Let's click on this one. Oh, loving that moodiness. Do I want strength? I'm just going to play with that and see what it does. Now I'm going to push it right to the right. That may be something you want to play with, but we'll come back down. I'll play with the grains, give it a little bit more pixelated in there. And then I might come back into the hardness. Do I want it moving that slider there? And you can see as you're looking, it's just shifting subtly the tones and detail within your image. Do I want to make it brighter? Do I want to add a bit more contrast? Do I want to play with hue and saturation? Now, there's a lot more features that we can play with in here, but I'm concentrating on the film type. Let's go back and choose Cool, and I'll click on one of the filter types. Look at that. Loving that depth of colour. Now, let's say that I want that one, but I'm going to drop the saturation. Just dial it down a little bit here. Now, it's giving me what I call blue undertones coming through. Now what I want to do is add some more blue, and this is where I'll show you how to use a cyan photo filter. I'm back in the Photoshop workspace, and let's have a look at the layers stack, and you can see now I've got a layer Nic 8 Analog Efex. Now I'll mention that these film types are also in Nic 7. I'm using the latest version of Nic Collection. And as an affiliate for DxO, I couldn't do the work that I do without using Nic Collection in my workflow. And then it gives me lots of choices in colour, it gives me detail, it gives me different ways that I can bring my images to life. Now, what I am looking at now, thinking it's got subtle tones, I'm going to put on a cyan photo filter, and I'm going to see what it does to the image. I'll come up here to my adjustments. I'll get photo filter, and I'll click on that. By default, it will go to warming, but I'm going to come down here and choose cyan. Now I get that subtle blue coming through. I could play with density and give it a little bit more push, and I'll move that slider up, or I might move it down, and I'm going to leave it there. What I'm going to do is turn off that layer and have a look. By applying that photo filter, I now get a different range of color depth. But where it all started was the Nik analog effects, the film type, choosing the film type or the color gradient across. This is a form of color grading that I'll use to get the depth of color in my images. From now, I could continue on. I could start adding other adjustment layers. I could even go back in to Nik Collection and use another filter. This video is all about showing you playing with the film types to see what color depth, tonal range that you can get in your images. I either use this at the beginning of my workflow, I could use it in the middle, or at the end as a finishing touch. I encourage you to explore Nik Collection 8, Analog, and the film types. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit subscribe for more creative tips, and you can always find me at Sandra D Imagery for courses, resources, and inspiration.